I let my wife celebrate for 1 week before she found out she'd already lost. Helena thought she was clever when she moved $500 million in 3 days. She threw a party, bought champagne, called her lawyer to celebrate the successful divorce strategy. What she didn't know was that I'd been watching her for 2 years. Every midnight meeting with my son, every forged document, every lie she told while slowly poisoning my coffee each morning. I recorded it all. In chess, there's a move called the quiet sacrifice. You let your opponent think they're winning while you set up checkmate. They celebrate their captured pieces, never realizing they've walked into a trap that will cost them everything. This story has more twists than a magician's deck of cards, and every single one will make you question who you can really trust. Helena made one fatal mistake. She assumed that because I loved her, I was weak. She confused kindness with stupidity, generosity with blindness. My name is Vincent Blackwood. For 59 years, I've built an empire worth $500 million, and in 1 week, I'm about to teach two people the difference between earning something and stealing it. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted completely, you know that sick feeling in your gut when everything clicks into place. Drop your city name below. You're not alone in this. And subscribe, because you need to hear how this ends. Because when the people closest to you decide to destroy everything you've built, sometimes the only way to save your legacy is to burn it all down yourself. Helena had no idea what was coming. The Blackwood name has meant something in this city for 80 years. My grandfather Harold started with 12 buildings in downtown Chicago during the Depression. While other men were losing everything, he was buying distressed properties and turning them into homes for working families. He understood something that took me decades to learn. Wealth without purpose is just greed with better furniture. My father James expanded to the suburbs in the 50s and 60s. He built shopping centers and office complexes, but he never forgot his father's principles. Every project had to serve the community, not just extract from it. When the civil rights movement challenged the real estate industry, my father was one of the first developers to integrate his properties voluntarily. It cost him contracts and friendships, but he said some things were worth more than money. I inherited that empire in 1985 and spent the next 35 years building it into something bigger than even my grandfather had imagined. 23 office towers reaching toward the clouds, 156 luxury apartments housing everyone from young professionals to established families, 12 shopping centers anchoring neighborhoods across 3 states. We didn't just own properties. We owned the dreams people build inside them. Helena came into my life 8 years ago when I was broken. My first wife, Catherine, died of cancer after a 2-year battle that left me emotionally and financially drained. Not the money, we had plenty of that, but watching the woman you love disappear piece by piece while the best doctors in the world stand helpless. That kind of pain costs something money can't measure. Ethan was 18 then, a senior in high school with college acceptance letters from Yale, Princeton, and Northwestern. Brilliant kid, full of potential, but something fundamental changed in him after his mother died. He started seeing me as an obstacle instead of a father. Every conversation became a negotiation. Every family dinner felt like a business meeting where someone was always pitching and someone else was always declining. Helena arrived like an answer to prayers I didn't know I was praying. 41 years old, intelligent, beautiful in that understated way that speaks to confidence rather than desperation. She was working as an events coordinator for the Chicago Symphony, and we met at a charity gala for children's cancer research. She listened when I talked about Catherine. She understood grief. She made Ethan laugh for the first time in months. The wedding was small. She wanted it that way, she said. Intimate. I should have realized she meant no witnesses, but I was a grieving man who thought he'd been given a second chance at happiness, and I grabbed it with both hands. Helena encouraged Ethan's sense of entitlement. When he came home from college with mediocre grades and grand plans, she'd nod supportively while I tried to explain that everything worthwhile requires work. When he borrowed money for spring break trips to Europe and forgot to pay it back, she'd suggest that maybe I was being too harsh. He's grieving, she'd say. Give him time. And time became 8 years of excuses. 8 years of watching my son drift further from everything his grandfather and great-grandfather had built. 8 years of small compromises that felt reasonable in the moment, but added up to something I didn't recognize. The Blackwood Properties headquarters sits on the 32nd floor of our flagship building in the heart of Chicago's financial district. Every morning for 3 decades, I'd ride the elevator to my corner office and look out at the skyline we'd helped shape. The Willis Tower, pointing toward the sky like an ambitious finger. The Merchandise Mart sprawling along the Chicago River. The endless grid of neighborhoods stretching toward the horizon, each one touched by something a Blackwood had built. That pride started dying the day I installed the cameras. 2 years ago, I began noticing things. Small things that individually meant nothing but collectively painted a picture I didn't want to see. Helena asking casual questions about our home security system. Ethan getting nervous whenever his phone rang during family dinners. Documents in my study moved slightly from where I'd left them. Files on my computer accessed when I was out of town. Nothing concrete, nothing actionable, just a father's intuition screaming that something was fundamentally wrong in his own house. The surveillance company was discreet and expensive. Executive Protection Services, their brochure called it. Industrial espionage prevention for high net worth individuals. I told them I was concerned about corporate competitors trying to access proprietary information from my home office. It wasn't entirely a lie. The cameras were invisible, woven into the existing security infrastructure. Audio pickup that could distinguish whispered conversations from across a room. Motion sensors that tracked movement patterns and flagged unusual behavior. I told myself it was for business security, protection against competitors and corporate spies. I was lying. I was protecting my family from my family. The system recorded everything automatically, storing footage in encrypted files that only I could access. For months, I watched nothing more suspicious than Helena rearranging flowers and Ethan playing video games until 3 in the morning. I began to think my paranoia had gotten the better of me. Then last month, Ethan came home with bruises on his wrists. Dark purple marks that looked like finger impressions, the kind you get when someone grabs you hard enough to leave lasting evidence. "Gym accident," he said when I asked. "Got caught under the weight bar." Helena nodded along sympathetically. "You know how reckless boys can be with their bodies," she said. But I saw something in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Not concern or motherly worry. Calculation. Like she was measuring my reaction and filing it away for future reference. That night I started watching the surveillance feeds more carefully. But Ethan said something that made my blood run cold. The breakthrough came at 2:30 in the morning on December 3rd. I was in my study reviewing acquisition contracts for a shopping center in Milwaukee when I heard voices from the living room below. Quiet voices, careful voices, the kind people use when they're discussing things they don't want overheard. I pulled up the camera feed on my computer and felt my world shift on its axis. Ethan and Helena were sitting at our dining room table, documents spread between them like battle plans. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, trust fund documentation. Every piece of financial information about the Blackwood Empire laid out under our antique chandelier. But these weren't our copies. These were photocopies, organized in file folders with handwritten labels. Someone had been systematically cataloging our wealth for months, maybe years. Helena was pointing to specific numbers, explaining something in whispers, too quiet for me to hear even with the enhanced audio. Ethan was taking notes, asking questions, nodding with the kind of focused attention he hadn't shown in years. This wasn't a son learning about his inheritance. This was a co-conspirator receiving instructions. I adjusted the audio settings and caught fragments of their conversation. The trust clauses activate after 90 days if he's declared, "But what about the federal reporting requirements?" Already handled that. The transfers have to be under $50,000 each to avoid. Meridian Corporation confirmed they'll pay $52,000 for the Milwaukee information. My son, my only son, was selling proprietary information about our pending acquisitions to our biggest competitor. I sat in that leather chair until sunrise, watching my family plot against me through a computer screen. Helena had spreadsheets detailing every asset we owned. Ethan had insider information about deals that weren't public yet. They had lawyers' business cards. They had bank account numbers for institutions I'd never heard of. They had been planning this for months. The most chilling part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was how natural they looked together. Helena explaining complex financial instruments like a seasoned wealth manager. Ethan asking sophisticated questions about tax implications and legal loopholes. They weren't fumbling through amateur hour conspiracy theories. They were executing a professional-grade theft operation. At 6:15 a.m., they finally packed up their documents and went to their respective bedrooms. Helena kissed my son on the forehead like a proud mother sending her child off to college. Ethan smiled at her with genuine affection. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my study, processing what I'd witnessed. Everything I'd attributed to grief, immaturity, and poor judgment was actually something much more calculated. My wife and son weren't drifting away from our family values. They were systematically dismantling everything previous generations had built. The next morning, Helena made me coffee with extra cream, just the way I like it. She kissed my cheek and asked about my meetings for the day. Her performance was flawless. Concerned wife, domestic goddess, the woman who'd rescued me from loneliness and brought harmony to our broken family. Ethan borrowed my car and promised to have it detailed before returning it. He even offered to pick up my dry cleaning. Such a thoughtful son, growing into his responsibilities. They were so normal, so loving, so convincing, that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined the midnight planning session. Maybe the stress of running a large company was making me paranoid. Maybe grief had permanently damaged my ability to trust the people closest to me. Then I checked our primary business account. $500 million, accumulated over 3 generations of careful investment and prudent growth, was gone. Not missing, not misplaced, not temporarily tied up in a complex transaction. Gone. Transferred to 6 different offshore accounts in 3 different countries over the course of 3 days. I called our bank immediately. Mr. Blackwood, those transfers were properly authorized, the account manager explained with professional courtesy. Your wife has signatory authority on all business accounts, remember? The documentation was all in order. I remembered. I'd granted Helena signing privileges 3 years ago when I'd had surgery to remove a kidney stone. Just for emergencies, I told her, in case something happens and the business needs immediate attention. Helena had created her emergency. The transfers were sophisticated, clearly planned by someone who understood federal banking regulations. Each one was just under the threshold that would require government notification. The receiving accounts were in jurisdictions known for banking privacy and minimal cooperation with U.S. law enforcement. Someone had done extensive research. That evening we had dinner at Morton's Steakhouse, our usual Friday night tradition. Helena was radiant, laughing at my stories, asking thoughtful questions about my day. She looked like a woman who'd just won the lottery and was trying not to gloat. You look tired, honey, she said, cutting her salmon with precise, delicate strokes. Maybe you should see Dr. Peterson again. The stress of managing everything is affecting your memory. Ethan nodded sympathetically. Dad, maybe it's time to think about stepping back from day-to-day operations. The company's getting too big for one person to handle effectively. They were tag-teaming me, setting up their narrative with the subtlety of experienced manipulators. The forgetful husband, whose mental capacity was declining. The overwhelmed executive who needed family intervention for his own protection. The concerned wife and devoted son forced to take control of a situation spiraling beyond his ability to manage. I played along perfectly. You might be right, I said, sipping my wine and trying to look appropriately confused. I have been forgetting things lately. Maybe I should schedule that appointment. Helena smiled and squeezed my hand with what appeared to be genuine affection. Her touch felt like ice water flowing through my veins. We just want what's best for you, she said. For all of us. Ethan raised his glass. To family, he said. To family, I agreed, clinking glasses and maintaining eye contact with both of them. I was looking at strangers who happened to share my name and address, and Helena had already lied about that appointment. The hidden camera system revealed 18 months of methodical planning. I spent the weekend reviewing archived footage, watching my wife and son construct their conspiracy with the patience of professional criminals. They'd started small. Helena would photograph documents while I was traveling. Ethan would copy files from my computer when I was at dinner meetings. They researched offshore banking, studied federal reporting requirements, and consulted with lawyers who specialized in complex family transitions. The December 3rd footage was their final strategy session, but it wasn't their first. I found recordings of similar meetings going back over a year. Helena's voice was crystal clear on the enhanced audio. Vincent's mental capacity is showing signs of decline. The board will support our position if we present a united front and proper medical documentation. Ethan had leaned forward, engaged in a way I hadn't seen since his mother's funeral. What about the original trust clauses grandfather wrote? Don't they have provisions about family succession? Already researched, Helena replied with the confidence of someone who'd done her homework. The lawyers found several exploitable elements. If Vincent is declared mentally incompetent, the normal succession rules can be challenged. We get control of day-to-day operations immediately, and the long-term charitable provisions can be voided through proper legal procedures. My grandfather's trust, written in 1943, was a sophisticated document designed to protect family wealth through multiple generations. Harold Blackwood had watched too many fortunes destroyed by entitled heirs and greedy spouses. His trust included specific protections against exactly the kind of behavior I was witnessing. But Helena didn't know about all the protections. She'd found the obvious ones, the clauses any competent lawyer would discover during routine estate planning research. She hadn't found the nuclear option. Hidden deep in the original trust documents, written in the careful legal language of a man who'd survived the Great Depression, was a provision that could instantly dissolve the entire Blackwood estate if certain conditions were met. If any family member attempted to defraud the trust or its legitimate beneficiaries, if corruption was detected in the succession process, if the trust's fundamental purpose was being violated, then everything, every building, every investment, every asset accumulated over 80 years would immediately transfer to designated charitable organizations. The nuclear option had never been activated because no previous generation had needed it, until now. I called Judge Patricia Holloway at 6 o'clock Monday morning. We'd been friends since law school, where she'd specialized in estate litigation while I'd focused on corporate development. Patricia understood family wealth in ways that most attorneys never would, both its power to create generational stability and its capacity to destroy the very people it was meant to protect. Vincent, this is early, even for you. Patricia, I need legal advice about family trust issues. Urgent family trust issues. Her tone shifted immediately to professional alertness. Messy divorce? Worse, systematic theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and possible attempted murder. There was a long pause. How much evidence do you have? 127 hours of audio and video surveillance. Detailed bank records showing unauthorized transfers totaling $500 million. Email communications between family members and outside conspirators. Medical documentation suggesting ongoing poisoning. Jesus, Vincent, bring everything to my office. 2 hours. Patricia, this gets complicated. Federal banking violations, international wire fraud, corporate espionage. This isn't just family court drama. Then we'll need federal help. I know people. Next, I called Detective Ray Sullivan. 10 years ago, when his daughter Jennifer was applying to colleges, a drunk driving arrest had threatened her scholarship opportunities. I'd made some calls, pulled some strings, and helped Jennifer get into Northwestern University, despite the legal complications. She'd graduated summa cum laude and was now a pediatric nurse. Ray remembered favors. Vince Blackwood, how's the real estate empire treating you? Ray, I need to discuss wire fraud, conspiracy, and grand theft with someone who understands federal financial crimes. Can you meet this afternoon? Christ, Vince, what kind of trouble are you in? The kind that requires FBI involvement and possibly international cooperation. And Ray, this conversation needs to stay between us until I can present formal evidence. You're talking about serious federal crimes. I'm talking about $500 million stolen by people I trusted with my life. Within 48 hours, Patricia had assembled emergency asset freeze documentation. Sullivan had contacted federal investigators who specialized in complex financial fraud. The legal machinery was in motion, but it moved with bureaucratic deliberation that felt agonizingly slow when I was living with people who'd already demonstrated they were capable of anything. The offshore accounts had been identified and flagged for investigation. The wire transfers were being traced through multiple international jurisdictions. Corporate espionage charges were being prepared against Ethan for selling proprietary information to Meridian Corporation. The trap was set, but Helena still didn't know that every account she'd touched was already being monitored by federal investigators. Helena still didn't know the accounts had already been frozen. Friday evening, I suggested dinner at Morton's Steakhouse. A family celebration, I announced over breakfast, for all our recent success and good fortune. Helena's face lit up with genuine pleasure. What a wonderful idea, Vincent. We have so much to be grateful for lately. Ethan seemed nervous, checking his phone more frequently than usual. His hands had a slight tremor when he reached for his coffee cup, either withdrawal symptoms from something he'd been taking or anxiety about something he was trying to hide. Business troubles? I asked when his phone buzzed for the fourth time during breakfast. Just logistics, he muttered, declining the call without looking at the number. Morton's was busy that Friday night. Chicago's financial district elite celebrating another successful week of making money from money. Helena dressed carefully for the occasion. Black dress, understated jewelry, the kind of elegance that suggested wealth without ostentation. She wanted to look like someone who belonged in places like this. During appetizers, Ethan excused himself to make a call. Through the restaurant's windows, I watched him pace on the sidewalk, gesticulating frantically with his free hand. His body language screamed panic, but when he returned to our table, his expression was carefully controlled. "Everything all right?" Helena asked with what appeared to be maternal concern. "Fine, just a supplier issue." I raised my glass of Cabernet. "To family loyalty," I said, making sure to maintain eye contact with both of them, "and to getting exactly what we deserve." Helena clinked glasses enthusiastically. "To new beginnings," she added. Ethan's hand was shaking when he lifted his glass. Wine sloshed slightly against the rim. "You know," I continued, settling into my role as the declining patriarch, "I've been thinking seriously about your advice, about stepping back from daily operations. Maybe it really is time for new leadership." Helena's eyes went wide with poorly concealed excitement. "Really, Vincent? That's wonderful news. The company needs fresh energy, new perspectives." "Absolutely," I agreed, cutting my steak with deliberate slowness. "And I want to make sure the transition is completely smooth. No legal complications, no regulatory issues, no surprises that could damage what previous generations built." Ethan's phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and went pale. "Excuse me," he said, standing abruptly. "I really need to take this." He walked outside again, and through the windows I could see him talking urgently into his phone. His free hand was clutched in his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was trying to explain some disaster to his mother. Helena noticed his distress too. He's been under tremendous stress lately. Maybe the responsibility of learning the business is overwhelming him. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe he's learning that actions have consequences in ways he didn't expect." She laughed, thinking I was making a general observation about young people facing adult responsibilities. She had no idea I was talking about the federal investigation that had frozen every account she'd touched. "The young generation wants everything immediately," Helena continued, warming to a theme she'd clearly developed. "They don't understand that real wealth takes time to build and wisdom to manage." "Wisdom," I repeated. "Yes, that's exactly what's been missing. Ethan returned to the table, looking like he'd seen his own death. Sweat was beading on his forehead despite the restaurant's air conditioning, and his hands were trembling. "Everything all right, son?" "Fine," he said, but his voice cracked on the single word. Helena was getting annoyed with his obvious distraction. "Ethan, we're having a family dinner. Put that phone away and be present with us." But Ethan couldn't sit still. He kept checking his phone, typing frantic messages, and glancing toward the exit, like he was planning an escape route. "I need to make one more call," he said finally. "No," Helena said firmly. "Whatever it is can wait until after dinner." Ethan looked at her with something approaching desperation. "It really can't." I decided to push the situation toward crisis. "Ethan, is there something you need to tell us? Some kind of business emergency?" No, everything's fine. Because if there's a problem with any of our accounts or investments, now would be the time to discuss it. As a family." He stared at me across the table, and I saw the moment when he realized I might know more than I was letting on. His eyes went wide, then darted to Helena, then back to me. "Dad, is there something specific you want to ask me about?" "Should there be?" Helena was watching this exchange with growing confusion. She could sense the undercurrent of tension, but couldn't identify its source. "Vincent, what's going on here?" I smiled at my wife with all the warmth I could fake. Just a father trying to understand his son's business concerns. Ethan's phone buzzed one more time. He looked at the screen and his face went completely white. "I have to go," he said, standing so quickly he knocked over his water glass. "Ethan!" Helena's voice carried enough authority to stop him mid-stride. "I'll explain later," he said. "I'm sorry, I have to go." He walked rapidly toward the exit, pulling out his phone before he had even reached the door. Helena turned to me with confusion and irritation. "What was that about?" "I have no idea," I said, "but I'm sure we'll find out soon enough." Through the windows, I watched Ethan pace frantically on the sidewalk, talking into his phone with the desperate intensity of someone whose world was collapsing. He pulled out his phone and whispered urgently, "We have a problem." Monday morning, Helena cornered me in my study like a prosecutor approaching a hostile witness. She was holding a manila envelope, and her face displayed the kind of righteous anger that comes from someone who believes they hold all the cards. "Vincent, we need to have a serious conversation." "Of course, darling. What's troubling you?" She opened the envelope with theatrical flourish and spread a dozen photographs across my mahogany desk. Professional quality images showing me with my secretary, Angela Morrison, in what appeared to be intimate, romantic moments. Dinner at Gibson's, the upscale steakhouse where Angela and I had taken clients last month. Walking together through Millennium Park after a site inspection, her hand resting on my arm as we discussed zoning regulations. Sitting close together in my car outside a property we were considering for acquisition. "I know about the affair," Helena announced, her voice trembling with what appeared to be genuine emotional pain. "I know you've been cheating on our marriage with that woman." I picked up each photograph, examining them with the careful attention they deserved. The lighting was excellent, the angles were professionally chosen, and the emotional implications were devastating. If someone didn't know the context, these images would tell a convincing story of infidelity. "These are very good," I said quietly. "Professional quality work." "Don't insult my intelligence, Vincent. I hired a private investigator. The evidence is overwhelming." "I'm sure it is. Tell me, Helena, what exactly do you want?" Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something calculating beneath the wounded wife performance. "I want a divorce, a fair divorce that recognizes what you've put me through." "And what would constitute fair in your opinion?" 50% of all assets, plus the house, plus ongoing spousal support." 50%? You humiliated me, Vincent. You violated our marriage vows with a woman half my age. I deserve compensation for the emotional damage you've caused. I leaned back in my chair, studying my wife's face. The performance was nearly perfect, but I'd been watching her practice deception for months. I could see the effort it required. "Helena, do you remember our wedding day?" Her frown indicated confusion at the apparent topic change. "Of course I remember." "You insisted on a small ceremony. No professional photographer, you said. Too expensive, too formal, just a few friends with digital cameras. What does our wedding have to do with your infidelity? Technology has advanced remarkably since then. Digital photography, embedded metadata, reverse image searches, facial recognition software. It's amazing what forensic specialists can discover about when and where photographs were taken. Her confidence wavered slightly. I don't understand what you're implying. I'm not implying anything, I'm stating facts. These photographs were taken last Thursday between 2 and 4 p.m. The metadata embedded in the digital files shows they were edited using Adobe Photoshop, professional version 2024. The facial expressions were digitally altered using AI enhancement software. Helena's face was beginning to lose color. You're making that up? Angela Morrison and I were attending a client presentation at the Merchandise Mart last Thursday afternoon. 14 people were in attendance, including representatives from 3 separate architectural firms. The meeting was recorded for legal purposes, and the timestamps are completely verifiable. You're lying. The FBI's Digital Forensics Laboratory is extraordinarily thorough when investigating federal crimes. They've examined every pixel of these images. Helena sat down heavily in the chair across from my desk. The FBI? Wire fraud is a federal crime, Helena. Moving $500 million across international borders without proper authorization tends to attract attention from people who take that sort of thing very seriously. She stared at me for a long moment, processing the implications of what I'd just told her. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I opened my laptop computer and turned the screen toward her. December 3rd, 2:30 in the morning. Your voice is very clear on this recording. The lawyers found several exploitable elements. If Vincent is declared mentally incompetent, the normal succession rules can be challenged. The color drained completely from her face as she heard her own voice played back through my computer speakers. She was listening to herself planning my destruction with the clinical detachment of a surgeon discussing tumor removal. But Helena was nothing if not adaptable. She rallied quickly, leaning forward with the aggressive desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. You can't use that recording in any legal proceeding. That's an illegal invasion of privacy. Any evidence obtained that way would be thrown out of court immediately. Actually, Illinois is a one-party consent state for audio recording. I'm legally permitted to record conversations that take place in my own home, especially when those conversations involve criminal conspiracy. Criminal conspiracy is a very serious accusation. Yes, it is, but that's not the most interesting part of this situation. What are you talking about? I closed the laptop and looked directly into her eyes. Helena, you've been poisoning me. If she'd been pale before, now she looked like a woman who'd seen her own ghost. That's absolutely ridiculous. Lithium carbonate, small doses mixed into my coffee over the past 6 months. Enough to cause confusion, memory problems, difficulty concentrating, the gradual appearance of mental decline that would support a legal case for declared incompetence. Helena stood up so abruptly she knocked over her chair. You're completely insane. No, Helena, I was being systematically poisoned. There's a significant medical difference. Dr. Peterson's blood work from last week was very revealing. The lithium levels in my system were consistent with deliberate, ongoing administration. She moved toward the door like a cornered animal seeking escape. You think you're so clever. You think you've figured everything out. But you have absolutely no idea what you're really up against. Then enlighten me. Helena turned back to face me, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely dangerous. Your precious son owes $4.2 million to some very dangerous people. Russian people. The kind who don't accept payment plans or negotiate extended terms. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt genuine physical fear. What are you talking about? Underground poker games, high-stakes gambling with people who consider broken bones a reasonable collection technique. Ethan thought he was smarter than everyone else, thought he could beat professional gamblers at their own game. He was wrong. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text message written in Cyrillic characters. Even without translation, the tone seemed unmistakably threatening. They've been extremely patient, but their patience has definite limits. If Ethan doesn't pay what he owes very soon, they'll start collecting their debt in ways that don't involve money. I stared at the message, trying to process what she was telling me. How long has this been going on? 6 months, maybe more. They've already given him a preview of what happens to people who don't pay their debts. She gestured toward the door. Those bruises on his wrists last month? That was just their opening offer. The room felt like it was spinning. Everything I'd discovered, all the legal preparation, the federal investigation, none of it would matter if my son's life was in immediate physical danger. Helena saw my expression and smiled with genuine satisfaction. You want to play legal games with trust funds and federal agents? Fine. Enjoy your moral victory. But while you're playing lawyer, your son is running out of time to stay alive. She headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the doorknob. Oh, and Vincent? Those photographs might be fake, but the threat is completely real. You have 24 hours to wire $10 million to an account I'll specify. Consider it life insurance for Ethan. She walked out, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of everything I thought I'd understood, and everything I was just beginning to realize I didn't understand at all. But she didn't know I had video footage of her meeting with the supposed Russian gangster 2 weeks ago. That night felt like the longest of my life. Every sound in our house, creaking floorboards, settling walls, the automated hum of the security system, felt like potential threats. Every shadow could hide someone dangerous. Helena had played her final card with the precision of someone who understood exactly where to apply maximum psychological pressure. At 3 o'clock in the morning, my phone rang. Unknown number with an international prefix. Mr. Blackwood? The voice was heavily accented, distinctly Eastern European. Yes. My name is Dmitry Volkov. I believe you know why I'm calling. My hands were shaking as I gripped the phone. What do you want? Your son has accumulated considerable debt in our business relationship. We have been patient, but patience is not unlimited resource. How much time does he have? Time is luxury your son cannot afford. But you have different resources available. 10 million American dollars, wire transfer to account we will provide. Very simple business transaction. And if I refuse? Then you will understand personally why your son has been having nightmares. The line went dead. I sat in my study until dawn, staring at the phone and trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. All my legal preparation, all the evidence I'd gathered, all the federal protection I'd arranged, none of it would matter if Ethan was murdered by Russian criminals. At 7 in the morning, Helena appeared in my doorway, wearing a silk robe and an expression of satisfied triumph. You look terrible, Vincent. Did Dmitri call? You orchestrated this entire thing. I orchestrated survival. For me, for Ethan, for everyone who matters in this situation. Ethan matters to me more than anything else in the world. Then you'll do what's necessary to keep him alive. I looked at my wife for a long moment, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time since we'd met. You're absolutely right. I will do exactly what's necessary. Her smile widened with anticipation. Excellent. The account information is, but not what you think I should do. Her expression faltered. Vincent, don't be stupid about this. These people will kill him without any hesitation. Maybe they will, or maybe they're not as dangerous as you want me to believe they are. What are you talking about? I opened my laptop and queued up another video file. This one showed Helena meeting with a man in an expensive suit outside the Palmer House Hotel downtown. They were laughing together, embracing like old friends, sharing what appeared to be very intimate conversation. Dmitry Volkov isn't Russian mafia, I said quietly. He's Anton Petrov, a struggling actor from Brighton Beach, who's been looking for steady work since his off-Broadway play closed 6 months ago. She stared at the computer screen, watching herself hand an envelope of money to her supposed Russian gangster. The accent is very good, by the way, professional quality, but the real Bratva doesn't negotiate payment plans over international phone calls, and they certainly don't give their targets 24 hours to consider wire transfer options. Helena backed toward the wall like a cornered animal. You don't understand the situation. The debt is completely real. Ethan does owe money to his college bookie. $3,700 for football bets placed during Northwestern's basketball season. Hardly the kind of debt that requires international criminal intervention. She was pressed against the wall now, trapped between my desk and the accumulated weight of her lies. Those bruises on Ethan's wrists? I continued. You made those yourself. Probably while he was passed out drunk, which happens frequently enough that he wouldn't remember the specific circumstances. Helena's composure was completely shattered now. No more wounded wife, no more concerned stepmother, no more calculating manipulator. Just desperate panic and the realization that her carefully constructed house of cards was collapsing. Your son is a gambling addict, Vincent. Alcohol, drugs, compulsive betting on everything from horse races to coin flips. I was trying to scare him into getting help. By stealing $500 million? By taking control before he destroyed everything our family has built? The mask was entirely off now. The word our hung in the air like a toxic cloud. She genuinely believed she was entitled to wealth she'd never earned, property she'd never built, and legacy she'd never contributed to creating. You were supposed to be grateful, she continued, her voice rising toward hysteria. I saved you from a son who would have gambled away your entire inheritance. I protected the Blackwood name from his weaknesses. By destroying the Blackwood family? By doing what you were too emotionally weak to do yourself. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 59 years. Helena, you made one crucial miscalculation. What's that? You assumed I was weak because I loved you both. At that moment, my study door opened. Helena spun around to see a young man she'd never seen before. Tall, dark-haired, wearing a crisp business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Helena, I said quietly, I'd like you to meet someone very important. She didn't know I had video of that meeting from 2 years ago. My name is Caleb Morrison, the young man said, stepping into my study with quiet confidence. I'm Mr. Blackwood's attorney, specializing in family law and estate planning. Helena looked between us with growing confusion. Vincent already has lawyers, the entire firm of Morrison, Hayes, and Associates. Mr. Morrison represents different interests, I explained carefully. Specifically, he specializes in inheritance disputes and succession planning for complex family situations. Caleb opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder bound in legal blue. Mrs. Blackwood, we need to discuss some recently discovered legal documents that may significantly impact your understanding of this situation. I don't know what kind of legal games you're trying to play, Vincent, but no games, Caleb interrupted with professional courtesy. Just facts that have recently come to light, Mrs. Blackwood. Were you aware that your husband has another child? The room went completely silent, except for the ticking of my grandfather's clock. Helena's face cycled through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, calculation, then something approaching panic. That's completely impossible. Vincent would have told me. Caleb handed her a manila folder. These are DNA test results, birth certificates, and legal acknowledgement documents. I am Vincent Blackwood's biological son, born 25 years ago to Catherine Morrison. I was legally acknowledged as his heir as of last week. Helena snatched the papers and scanned them frantically, her hands shaking. This has to be fabricated. You can't just appear out of nowhere and claim inheritance rights. Actually, I can, Caleb said with calm professionalism, especially when the existing designated heir has compromised his legal standing through criminal activity. I watched Helena process the implications. She was smart enough to understand that if Ethan was disqualified due to his federal crimes, if I died or was declared incompetent, the inheritance wouldn't automatically transfer to my surviving spouse. It would go to my next legal heir. Vincent, she said slowly, her voice carefully controlled, what exactly have you done? What I should have done years ago, protected my family's legacy from people who see it as their personal treasure chest. Helena turned to Caleb with desperate urgency. How much do you know about his business operations? Everything, Caleb replied matter-of-factly. My mother worked as his executive assistant for 15 years before I was born. I've been studying Blackwood Properties' corporate structure since I was old enough to understand financial statements. And, I added, Caleb has spent the past 6 months reviewing all of our corporate transactions, including the proprietary information that was sold to Meridian Corporation. Helena's face went white. Ethan did. $52,000 in exchange for inside information about 3 pending acquisitions, including detailed financial projections and negotiation strategies. That's industrial espionage, Helena. Federal crimes carry federal penalties. Caleb pulled out another legal document. This is a family trust modification filed this morning with the probate court. It establishes clear succession protocols for situations where the primary heir has compromised their legal eligibility through criminal activity. Helena read quickly, her hands visibly trembling. You can't do this. I'm your legal wife. I have established rights under Illinois marriage law. You had rights, I corrected, until you committed wire fraud, attempted murder through poisoning, extortion, conspiracy, and identity theft. Our prenuptial agreement has very specific clauses about criminal behavior. She looked frantically from me to Caleb and back again. Where is Ethan? What have you done with him? Ethan is safe, I said, and for the first time in years, he's getting the help he actually needs. What kind of help? The kind he should have received instead of enablement and criminal conspiracy. Helena's phone buzzed loudly in the sudden silence. She glanced at the screen, and her expression changed to something approaching pure terror. Problem? I asked. The offshore accounts. They're not just frozen anymore. They're being actively seized by federal agents. Asset forfeiture? Caleb explained helpfully. Standard procedure in federal fraud investigations involving international wire transfers. Helena stared at her phone like it had betrayed her personally. This can't be happening. We planned everything so carefully. You planned theft, I corrected. The federal government has considerable experience dealing with theft, regardless of how carefully it's planned. Helena turned to face me, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely frightened rather than just angry or calculating. Vincent, we can work this out. We can negotiate some kind of arrangement. We can't, I said quietly. You burned that possibility when you decided I was worth more to you sick than healthy. She stared at me for a long moment, then looked around my study as if seeing it for the first time. The leather-bound law books, the family photographs spanning 4 generations, the awards and recognition accumulated over decades of legitimate business success. All of this, she said slowly, the surveillance, the federal investigation, finding him. She gestured toward Caleb. How long have you been planning this response? Since the morning I realized my wife was systematically poisoning me. Helena straightened her shoulders, trying to salvage some dignity from the wreckage of her schemes. You think you've won some kind of victory here? I think I protected my family's legacy from people who would have destroyed it. She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the brass doorknob. And Ethan, what happens to your son now? My son gets an opportunity to choose who he wants to become. Helena nodded slowly. And if he chooses incorrectly? Then he'll face the consequences like the adult he's supposed to be. She opened the door, then looked back one final time. You know, Vincent, I really did love you once, before I understood what you could provide for me. I know, I said. That's what made the betrayal hurt so much. After she left, Caleb and I sat in contemplative silence for several minutes. How are you feeling about all this? He asked. Like I just saved my family by systematically destroying it. Caleb closed his briefcase with a soft click. Sometimes destruction is the only path to authentic reconstruction. I looked at this young man, my son, and saw something I hadn't seen in Ethan's eyes for years. Respect. Not for what I could give him, but for what I'd built and what I represented. Are you ready for this kind of responsibility? I asked. Are you ready to trust me with it? That was exactly the right answer. Helena looked at the young man and asked, Who are you? The final confrontation took place in our living room at exactly 8 o'clock the following evening. I had requested everyone's presence. Helena, Ethan, Caleb, Detective Sullivan, and Judge Holloway. Time for all deceptions to end and all truths to be acknowledged. Ethan sat slumped in the leather armchair where he used to do homework as a teenager, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hands shook slightly when he reached for his water glass, and his eyes couldn't seem to focus on any one person for more than a few seconds. Helena maintained her composure on the edge of our sofa. but I could see the tension in her shoulders and the way her fingers gripped her purse like it contained life-saving medication. I want everyone to understand exactly where we stand, legally and personally, I began, my voice carefully controlled. Helena, you're facing federal charges for wire fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder through poisoning, and identity theft. Ethan, you're looking at charges for corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit fraud. Helena lifted her chin defiantly. You can't prove the poisoning charge. That's completely circumstantial. Detective Sullivan spoke up from his position near the fireplace. Actually, Mrs. Blackwood, we can prove it quite definitively. The coffee maker in your kitchen tested positive for lithium carbonate residue. Your fingerprints are on the medication bottle we discovered hidden in your cosmetic bag upstairs. That medication was legitimately prescribed for my anxiety disorder. Under your husband's name and insurance policy, Sullivan continued, that constitutes identity theft and insurance fraud, in addition to the attempted murder charge. Ethan finally looked up from his hands. Dad, I need to say something. I'm so incredibly sorry. I'm sorry for everything I've done, everything I've betrayed, everything I've destroyed. Apologies don't undo criminal activity, son. I understand that. The gambling, it started with small bets on college football games, just weekend entertainment. But then it escalated, and I thought if I could just make one really big score, I could pay back everything I owed, and you'd never have to know about any of it. Helena shot him a warning look that clearly said stop talking, but he ignored her completely. She convinced me that you were getting too old to manage everything effectively. She said the company was becoming too complex for one person to handle, that family intervention was necessary for everyone's protection. And you believe that narrative? I wanted to believe it, because the alternative was admitting that I'd completely screwed up everything you'd entrusted me with. I turned my attention to Helena. And you? What's your justification for systematic betrayal? I don't need justification. I saw what was coming. A gambling addict who would eventually destroy everything, and a husband too emotionally blind to prevent it. I tried to save your legacy. By stealing it? By taking control before it was too late to salvage anything meaningful. Judge Holloway cleared her throat authoritatively. Mrs. Blackwood, you need to understand something crucial about the legal situation you're facing. The trust documents that Vincent's grandfather created in 1943 have very specific provisions for exactly these circumstances. What kind of provisions? If any family member attempts to defraud the trust or its legitimate beneficiaries, their inheritance rights are immediately and permanently revoked, and all assets transferred to predetermined charitable organizations. Helena's face went pale. That's not legally possible. Holloway produced an aged document bound in legal blue. It's called a dissolution clause, sometimes referred to as a nuclear option. Harold Blackwood was an extremely careful man who had witnessed what happened to other family fortunes when greed and entitlement took precedence over stewardship. But Vincent can choose not to activate that clause, right? He has discretionary authority? Actually, I said, I activated it this morning. The room fell completely silent. As of 9 o'clock this morning, every asset in the Blackwood Trust has been transferred to the Harold Blackwood Foundation for Urban Development. Blackwood Properties, all real estate holdings, investment portfolios, offshore accounts, everything. Helena stood up so abruptly she knocked over her wine glass. You can't do that. I'm your legal wife. You were my wife. The divorce papers were filed simultaneously with the trust dissolution. Ethan looked stricken. Dad, what does this mean what about our family's future? Our family's future depends entirely on whether family members choose to earn their place in it. Caleb spoke for the first time since introductions. The foundation is actively hiring for several positions: property management, community outreach, affordable housing development. Real work with real responsibility and genuine oversight. You're offering me a job? Ethan asked. We're offering you an opportunity to rebuild what you've destroyed, I said. But it starts from the bottom. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no family connections that bypass normal procedures. What about treatment for the gambling addiction? 60 days of inpatient rehabilitation, followed by ongoing therapy and mandatory support group participation. Completely non-negotiable. And if I refuse any of that, then you face the criminal charges without family support, and you disappear from our lives permanently. Helena had been listening to this exchange with mounting horror. You're giving away $500 million just to teach your son some kind of lesson? I'm investing $500 million in saving my son's character and protecting our family's actual legacy. She grabbed her purse and headed toward the exit. You're all completely insane. Just before she reached the front door, Detective Sullivan called out, Mrs. Blackwood, don't make any plans to leave the Chicago area. Your arraignment is scheduled for Monday morning at 9. She paused with her hand on the doorknob, then pulled out her phone and typed frantically. After a moment, she looked up with something approaching complete panic. The offshore accounts. They're completely empty now. Asset forfeiture, Sullivan explained matter-of-factly. The federal government moves very efficiently when they have clear evidence of international financial crimes. Helena turned back to face us one final time. Vincent, please. We can fix this situation. We can negotiate some kind of reasonable settlement. We can't fix anything, I said simply. You broke something that can't be repaired through negotiation. She nodded slowly, and I could see understanding finally settling over her features. Then she opened the door and walked out of our lives forever. After the others left, Ethan and I sat alone in the living room where this had all begun. Dad? Yes, son? I want to try. The treatment program, the entry-level job, earning back your respect. I want to try to become someone worthy of the family name. I reached over and placed my hand on his shoulder. Then we'll try together. But Ethan? Yeah? This time you have to do the work yourself. Helena whispered, Oh God, what have we done? 90 days later, I stood in my empty corner office, carefully packing the last of my personal items into cardboard boxes. The view hadn't changed. Chicago's magnificent skyline still stretched toward the horizon, testament to a century of ambition made manifest in steel and glass. But everything else was fundamentally different. Ethan had successfully completed his first 60 days of inpatient rehabilitation. The reports from his counselors were cautiously optimistic. He was confronting his addictions with the kind of brutal honesty that recovery demanded, working with therapists who understood that healing meant much more than just abstaining from destructive behaviors. It meant rebuilding character from the foundation up. The halfway house where he was living now required him to work a regular job, attend daily group meetings, and submit to random drug testing. No special treatment, no family connections, no shortcuts around the basic requirements of rebuilding a shattered life. But he was doing it. Day by day, choice by choice, he was becoming someone I could respect again. Caleb knocked on my office door frame. Ready for the transition? Almost. I picked up a framed photograph from my desk. 4 generations of Blackwood men standing proudly in front of our very first building. My great-grandfather Harold, with his stern immigrant determination. My grandfather James, with his quiet dignity. My father Vincent Sr., with his visionary confidence. And me, holding my infant son Ethan, both of us unaware of the journey that lay ahead. My great-grandfather would have understood what we did, I said. Burning down the empire to save its soul? Something like that. And we rode the elevator down to the ground floor together, where a small crowd had gathered for the official transition ceremony. Members of the foundation board, community leaders, tenant representatives from our residential properties, and local business owners whose lives had been touched by the Blackwood legacy. Mrs. Rodriguez from our Spring Street apartments stepped forward, her hands folded carefully in front of her. Mr. Blackwood, I wanted to thank you personally. My granddaughter starts Northwestern University next month because of the Foundation's scholarship program. Thank the Foundation, I said. I'm just a volunteer now. But she shook her head firmly. You gave up everything so people like my family could have homes we can actually afford. That's not something you forget, no matter what title you have. As the formal ceremony continued, I found myself reflecting on the nature of legacy. Helena had thought legacy was money, assets that could be counted, transferred, and converted into personal luxury. Ethan had believed it was birthright, something owed rather than earned, inherited rather than created. They were both fundamentally wrong. Legacy is what you build that continues to serve a purpose after you're gone. It's the principles you establish, the lives you improve, the example you set for others to follow courageously. The Blackwood name would endure, but not because of the buildings we had owned or the money we had accumulated. It would endure because we had chosen to transform wealth into something meaningful. 3 months after that ceremony, Ethan called me from his apartment near the foundation offices. "Dad, I have some news to share with you." "Good news or concerning news?" "Definitely good news. I got promoted to maintenance supervisor for the South Side properties. Caleb said I could start Monday, but I wanted to ask you first. Is it appropriate for me to accept more responsibility?" I smiled, remembering how he used to ask permission for everything when he was small, before entitlement had poisoned his understanding of how the world actually worked. "Son, it's not the family business anymore. It's something much more important than that." "I know. That's exactly why I want to do it correctly this time." "Then do it correctly. Show up every day. Work harder than anyone expects. Help people solve their problems. Earn your place through competence and character." "I will, Dad. I promise you that." After we hung up, I sat in my modest two-bedroom apartment downtown, within walking distance of the Foundation headquarters, where I now volunteered 3 days each week. The walls were mostly bare, except for one photograph. Caleb and Ethan together at Ethan's rehabilitation graduation ceremony, both of them genuinely smiling. That evening, I received a letter forwarded from federal prison in Pennsylvania. Helena's handwriting was still neat and controlled, even behind bars. "Vincent," it read, "I've had considerable time to think about everything that happened. The lawyers tell me I'll serve 7 years, possibly less, with good behavior and cooperation. I want you to know that I understand why you did what you did. I'm angry, yes, but I understand the reasoning. I hope Ethan finds what he's looking for. I hope you find peace. We could have been happy together, if I had been different. If we had both been different. But we weren't, and this is how our story ends. Take care of yourself and the people who matter to you." Lenon. I read the letter twice, then filed it away carefully. She was correct about one thing. This was how our particular story ended. But it was also how other, more important stories were just beginning. The foundation was approving its first round of microloans to help tenants start small businesses. Caleb was developing a comprehensive mentorship program for young people in our residential communities. Ethan was discovering that genuine satisfaction came from building things rather than simply inheriting them. 6 months ago, I had believed that my legacy was about protecting what previous generations had built. I was wrong. My legacy was about having the courage to tear down what had stopped serving its intended purpose, and the wisdom to rebuild it into something better. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children is the opportunity to earn their own way in the world. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your community is the chance to take control of their own future. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to start over with clear principles. The Blackwood name still carries weight in this city, but now it means second chances earned through hard work. It means that wealth should serve people rather than the other way around. It means that family is defined by who stands with you when you choose what's right over what's easy. My son hugged me and said, "I want to earn it back." 5 years have passed since that evening in our living room when everything changed forever. I'm sitting in a coffee shop across from the Harold Blackwood Foundation headquarters, watching Caleb and Ethan walk out together after another productive board meeting. They're discussing plans for the new affordable housing project on the South Side, pointing at architectural blueprints, solving complex problems with the kind of collaborative energy I always hoped to see between my sons. Ethan has been completely sober for 5 years now. He manages property maintenance for 18 buildings across the city, and his crews respect him because he works harder and longer than anyone else. Last spring, he married Sarah Chen, a social worker he met at a community organizing meeting. She knows nothing about the Blackwood fortune that used to exist, and Ethan prefers it that way. He's building a life with his own hands, his own choices, his own earned achievements. Caleb has expanded the foundation beyond anything I originally imagined possible. The scholarship program has now sent 68 young people to college, many of them the first in their families to pursue higher education. The Small Business Loan Program has helped launch 93 local enterprises, creating over 400 jobs in neighborhoods that banks had written off as too risky for investment. The Affordable Housing Initiative has provided homes for over 500 families, with community ownership structures that give residents real control over their living conditions. Helena was released after serving 4 years of her sentence. She moved to Seattle, started a small consulting business focused on helping small nonprofits manage their finances, and sends a brief Christmas card every year with the same simple message: still learning and trying to do better. I genuinely appreciate both the consistency and the humility. The Blackwood Properties empire no longer exists in any recognizable form, but something infinitely more valuable has taken its place: community ownership, local democratic control, and the deep understanding that wealth is a tool for creating opportunity rather than a trophy for personal display. Last month, Mrs. Rodriguez's granddaughter graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in civil engineering and urban planning. She wants to design affordable housing that serves working families. The cycle of positive change continues to expand. I keep a new photograph on my desk now. 5 men standing in front of our newest community center. My great-grandfather Harold with his immigrant determination. My grandfather James with his quiet dignity. My father with his visionary leadership. Ethan with his hard-earned sobriety. And Caleb with his principled idealism. 5 generations, each contributing something different but meaningful to an ongoing legacy of service. Sometimes people ask if I regret giving away $500 million. The question always surprises me because they assume I lost something valuable. What I actually lost was the burden of protecting money that wasn't serving its intended purpose. What I gained was the knowledge that my children, both of them, are people worth respecting and trusting with real responsibility. The Foundation's mission statement now hangs prominently in our lobby: creating sustainable opportunity through community ownership, building character through earned success, and ensuring that each generation leaves the world more just and equitable than they found it. Helena was right about one crucial thing: wealth absolutely should be protected and preserved. But she was completely wrong about how to accomplish that protection. You don't protect wealth by hoarding it or passing it automatically to people who haven't demonstrated they deserve the responsibility of stewardship. You protect wealth by using it strategically to create more wealth. Not just financial wealth, but human wealth, social wealth, community wealth. Strong neighborhoods where children can grow up safely. Self-sufficient families who understand that dignity comes from contribution. Young people who learn that respect must be earned, and that genuine success means lifting others as you climb toward your own goals. Every morning I walk past buildings that used to carry the Blackwood name prominently. They're owned by their residents now, managed by people who live in them, maintained by workers who understand that their labor has meaning far beyond a weekly paycheck. The Blackwood legacy isn't what we owned or accumulated. It's what we chose to do when ownership became a limitation rather than an opportunity. And that's how you actually protect a family, a fortune, and a future worth having. Not by desperately clinging to what previous generations created, but by proving yourself worthy of their trust. Not by demanding loyalty from others, but by earning it through consistent service. Not by preserving the past unchanged, but by building something worthy of the future we want to create. If this story resonates with your own experience, if you've ever had to choose between what's comfortable and what's right, share your city name below. Because the world desperately needs more people willing to tear down what's broken and build something better in its place. And that's how you protect a legacy that actually matters.